Hey people. It's been a while since I spoke directly to the Accidental Gods community, which is you, and we've had a lot of new subscribers to the newsletter lately. So this seems like a good time to welcome you who are new, to share what's happening, reflect on the broader context, and then at the end, I will have a meditation that is designed with all of our subscribers, the old and the new, in mind. And before we get to that, I would like to revisit why we're here. A reminder for those of you who've been with us for a while, and a welcome for those of you who have recently joined. We are in a moment of profound transition. If you're here, you almost certainly recognize that this could be one of the most significant inflection points in the evolution of humanity. Everything that we do now, individually and collectively, within our communities of place, purpose, and passion, will impact the way the world unfolds. We are the ancestors our descendants will look back to. Clearly, this has always been true. But I don't think there has ever been a point where the whole of our trauma culture's worst decisions, based on the wrong story mindset of predatory capitalism, have all come home to roost at once. To be clear, we are not just in a climate emergency. It's not just carbon pollution that's killing us. Industrial effluent is creating dead zones in the oceans. There are forever chemicals in the rain, microplastics in the clouds, and the combination of perverse incentives in our social media ecosystems and unbridled AI that we treat not as kin in the emerging web of life, but as a tool to extract more, faster. All of this is destroying our capacity for sense-making and our trust in our institutions. The concept of liberal democracy is far from perfect. But what threatens to replace it is a lot worse. So, given all of this, how do we each become the best ancestor that we can possibly be? How do we rise to meet the magnitude of the moment? How do we hospice modernity, acknowledging that it has had its day, and nurture something new in its place that could yet lead to humanity taking its place as a self-conscious node in a thriving, flourishing web of life? How, in fact, do we make the shift from being embedded in a trauma culture to embodying an initiation culture? This, I think, is one of the clear dividing lines of our times. Francis Weller named the distinction between initiation culture and trauma culture, and in this respect I am quoting pretty much directly from him when he says, "Initiation cultures are defined by those in which individuals undergo episodic, intermittent, contained encounters with death. This containment is held by the elders, the community, and the more than human world, and within this container, the individual is pushed to the edges of themselves until they have to ask for help. From all parts of this, from the human and more than human world, from the elders, from the community, and from everything else in the web of life. If they can receive and implement this help, they return to their community, to the elders, to the people, alive with wonder and awe, fluent in the ways of asking and receiving, and aware of the reciprocal responsibility that life entails. They return with pride, self-respect, and with a deep, abiding respect for others in all of the world around them. Because this is what real community means: a sharing of mutual respect, pride in each other's achievements, in each other's joy and wonder, and with the capacity to engage with whatever the world throws at us, safe in the knowledge that we face nothing alone, that we are always part of a team, that we can meet any challenge up to and including the rite of passage that is death. The trauma culture, by contrast, offers no such containment. Our elders are few, and community has been sacrificed on the altar of individuation. by the myth of what Tanya Luhrmann calls the citadel mind and the very real sense of separation that this isolation brings. Our encounters with death are not held in joy as ways to grow. They come as triggers and traumas that stack and stack and stack until they overflow, and we become yet another data point in the genuinely horrifying statistics of mental health breakdown that typifies our culture. Vanessa Andreotti, whose book Hospicing Modernity was written with her name as Vanessa Mojada de Oliveira, I don't know why. Anyway, it's essential reading. She says that her Indigenous grandfather defines the core trauma of modernity not as the horrors of the land grabs and the mass slaughter. These are deeply, deeply traumatic. That they are all epiphenomena based on the core trauma, that is a belief in separability, not just separation, but the very possibility that separation can happen. When everybody else outside of our culture knows at a core level, deep in the marrow of their being, in the very essence of their souls, that we are not separate. We are an integral part of the web of life. So to be clear, being a part of an initiation culture is our evolutionary history and our birthright. Our ancestors, all the way back, all the way to early modern humans and before, grew in these cultures. And people today who are born into fully functioning Indigenous cultures, such as they still remain, grow there now. And we are born expecting this, expecting in the deepest part of our souls that we will be welcomed, that we will be cherished in a web of connection, sufficiency, and agency, where being, becoming, and belonging are the inherent gifts of life. Clearly, our culture doesn't give us this. It gives us separation, scarcity, and powerlessness. I listened to a podcast recently in which the guest travelled frequently between Bhutan and North America, and she was asked if she experienced culture shock, and yes, she did, whenever she returned to modernity, to our culture of massive excess that coexists with that pervasive fear of loss and impoverishment. In Bhutan, a nation that measures gross national happiness instead of GDP, there isn't untrammeled joy, but there is a sense of belonging. And when the government found out recently that women are less happy than men, and the young are less happy than the old, and that farmers are less happy than anybody else, they have acted on this information to improve conditions for women, for the young, for farmers, asking them what they needed to feel more connected, to feel a greater sense of belonging and being and becoming, of agency, of sufficiency, of connection. And the neurophysiology behind this is interesting, I think, and useful. If we bring things down to their lowest common neuroscience denominators, there are broadly two kinds of reward centers in our brains, or at least two that we know of just now. The first are the dopamine hits. We get a dopamine blip from feeding our addictions, white carbs, say, or alcohol, or like on Facebook, or cocaine, or the huge cocaine-like hit we get when our social cultural tribe gets to win over the other tribe, particularly if it has previously looked as if we were going to lose. A lot of Democrats and their supporters are experiencing big dopamine hits right now as I record this, knowing that this is really fragile and it could fall apart at any moment. But still, these hits are as addictive as a noseful of cocaine, and just as damaging, because dopamine rewards are short-acting, discrete, and subject to the law of diminishing returns, which means we need more white carbs, alcohol, tribal success on the internet, or bigger and bigger boxes from Amazon to get the same hit as last time. But, and this is crucial, no matter how much we accumulate, the void inside remains unfilled. The traumas continue to stack. It doesn't matter if we're sniffing glue or building rockets to Mars. There is no amount of dopamine that will heal the gap because it's not dopamine that we need. It's serotonin. So let's look at this reward center in our brains, which is much bigger, which is more of a mesh and less of single dopamine neurons firing. When we look at them in depth, the effects of inputs to our serotonin reward centers are long-lasting, mutually reinforcing, and cumulative. The opposite of the individual, isolated, non-cumulative hits of the dopamine that are subject to diminishing returns. Serotonin is not allied to our addictions. Instead, the serotonin centers are fed by a sense of community, by sharing, by the pride we feel when we have the respect of those whom we respect in our turn, and we offer it back. So they're not the isolated blips, they're a mesh of mutual reinforcement. And they last a long time. Singing together in community once a week will be enough to maintain the sense of community cohesion. Although living, breathing, working, playing together, as we did in our forager-hunter clans and tribes for almost all of human existence, builds the mesh into the container that holds the intermittent encounters with death that we see now as rites of passage. There is a really interesting set of experiments that were done way back in the 70s by a group in Canada led by Bruce K. Alexander. Do Google it, don't look at Wikipedia, because that's written by the people who really want to hold us in Citadel mind. Go and look at the original stuff, which shows us that serotonin beats dopamine every time. Alexander's group put rats in isolated cages and offered them plain tap water or water laced with sugar and morphine. And they chose the morphine in vast, vast quantities. But when Alexander's group built a rat park, much bigger with lots of rats and family groups, lots of places to play, lots of enrichment in the environment, the rats in there were having too good a time. They were building community. They were doing what rats, which are highly intelligent, like to do. And they didn't drink the sugared morphine water much at all. And then, if they took one of the morphine-addicted rats into the group, these new incomers were brought into the group. They were made part of the community, and they were helped to wean themselves off the drugs. And they didn't see the DTs. They didn't see all of the horrors that we associate with going cold turkey. They just saw previously deeply unhappy rats becoming, apparently, outwardly, observably, happy rats. And yes, rats are not people. And a lot of very, very bad science has been conducted on the assumption that something that is not a human is useful as an analog for how people will behave, either physiologically or emotionally or mentally or spiritually. But I am tagging this to the work of von Wilkins on what he calls zoochosis, which is the fact that humans in our dominant trauma culture exhibit pretty much all of the psychopathologies of animals in a zoo. In his PhD, Wilkins writes, "The collective developmental trauma that we experience points to a cage that is constructed through norms and conventions, and a faulty definition of sanity that condones us living in a way that is killing our own life support system. By living in a way that is anti-ecological and hurting us, but then naming it as sanity, we validate and condone it, and then teach it to our kids. It becomes a secret cage that prevents us from living as functioning members of the Earth community." Which is another way of saying we create a trauma culture and inflict it on our children who are born expecting an initiation culture. I am booked into March of next year, so I'm taking a break. But I'm hoping to invite Vaughn onto the podcast when I next have a gap, so we will leave that one for now. But what I want you to take away from this is that if we learn how to build real, functioning cultures where we experience respect, relevance, agency, reciprocity, and responsibility, we can reverse the isolation and devastation of our trauma culture. It is possible. We can do this. And I believe it is the single most important thing that any of us can do now. So then the obvious question is, how do we do this? Clearly, it's not enough just to say that we need to reconnect with the web of life, to share a few pretty memes on social media, put pictures of forests and oceans on our desktops, and maybe go out and plant a few trees. That's not enough to put modernity to bed. It doesn't help us go upstream to look at the core wounding of whatever happened that split us all. We might not need to do that, and it's a long, long way back. I think it happened before the agricultural revolution. If you're interested in how that might not have been progress and might actually have been a desperately bad default option, take a look at The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and Wengrow that we talk about a lot on the podcast, or if you want something much smaller and easier to read, Christopher Ryan's Civilized to Death is a pretty good starter. But even knowing this doesn't help. We are swimming within the mindset of our trauma culture, within the structures of the death cult of predatory capitalism, the superorganism, whatever we want to call it. Everything that we do is predicated on this. It's really hard to step out of this. We need help from each other, from people who get it, and I think the most help is likely to come from the more than human world. So this is why accidental gods exist, because it's easy to say that too, and it's far harder to make it happen, to make it real, to break down the barriers so that separability is not a thing. And to be clear, we don't pretend to have all the answers. We absolutely do not have a quick fix because there are no quick fixes. But I've been asking this question of the web of life for decades and seeking out people that I believe are close to the answers, the elders of our time, the good ancestors, the people who understand the urgent need to open ourselves to the web of life and to ask, what do you want of me? And to hear and respond to the answers in real time. So the podcast is one result of this. Every week we speak to someone who feels as if they exist at the emergent edge of into becoming, someone who can add their spark to the wisdom of our overall fires of transformation. At the other end of what is quite a wide spectrum is the Dreamy Awake small group one-to-one trainings that we offer. Nobody has yet come around the full wheel in less than 16 years, so this is a fairly significant commitment from us and from you. The early years of this are now being taught by my very wonderful senior apprentice, Lou Mayer, who's running 3 or 4 at least foundation groups annually, in person and online, so that we can accommodate people in other time zones so you don't have to travel by plane to be with us. And then she also teaches the early year-on-year gated groups that go around the first cycle of the wheel. In between lies the Accidental Gods membership, where we have individual, carefully handcrafted modules designed to help you connect to the web of life. It takes time. It takes commitment and a willingness to build habits that reach into your everyday life. But if you give us 10 minutes a day to connect to, say, water each morning in all the different ways that we offer, that can grow into a connection that becomes alive in every cell of your body, every moment of your life, so that every time you connect to water in whatever way, it becomes something living for you. And then the same for earth, for air, for fire, and then all of the other things that we build on top of that. If you work with this year's module, you develop a practice of building gratitude, compassion, and joyful curiosity, the 3 pillars of the heart mind, and these too will become the core tenor of your days. With time, it does take time, I cannot emphasize this enough. You'll begin to hear the song of the stars, the whisper of the worms, and the voice of the web becomes your voice. We all have parts of us that project, those parts that want to cut us down and those that want us to be the hero who can snap their fingers and make miracles happen. These parts and all of those in between can learn patience, all of them. We are all capable of making the choice in any given moment. Do I give more love, joy, awe, wonder, More heart exploding gratitude to the world for the miracle of being alive? Or do I throw out more despair, more desolation, more despite? I had a truly heartwarming message today on the forum from someone who had taken the teachings of the Heart Mind module and let them reach into their marriage to infuse a potential argument with a different kind of fire. Truly, this works if we let it. The choice becomes our choice, the choice. And our answers matter, moment by moment. So that's it for now. That's where we're at. That's why we're here. That's what we offer. And because it matters, because it never hurts to remember that we have a choice, here's a meditation, a visualization, to help you embody that choice as you go through your days. Thank you for being there. Thank you for giving us the time. Please find yourself somewhere quiet to be where no one's going to disturb you. And give yourself time to connect to the things that matter. Because of the time of year, and because I'm recording this in the Northern Hemisphere, this is designed to be at the equinox, the autumn equinox going from summer into winter. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere and this is not the right time for you, there is another meditation. There will be a link to it wherever you found this. Please go with that one instead.